of the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission. My name is Paul Solomon. I'm the chair. We will get started with a roll call, but first I want to wish everyone a happy new year. And it looks like we have just enough people here for quorum, so we'll be able to get all of our action items covered. Jenny, you want to start with roll call, please?
I do. Commissioner Beach.
Present.
Commissioner Freeman.
I am on the call.
Commissioner Harnden. Commissioner Harris.
I'm here.
Commissioner Lehman.
Present.
Commissioner McPherson. Commissioner Norton. Commissioner Perosa.
Present.
Chair Solomon.
Present.
Commissioner Miller.
I'm here.
Commissioner Lewis. And Commissioner Przonski. And we do have quorum.
Excellent. All right. Well, we will get started. I believe we have folks signed up for public comment, correct?
We do. We've got 3 today, and I have first on my list today, Jill Bryant from Portland Public Schools.
Great. And just remind folks, we've got 3 minutes for public comment. So welcome, Dr. Bryant.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me. I've got a bit of a cough, so I might need 10 extra seconds.
No problem.
Yes, I'm Dr. Jill Bryant, she, her pronouns, and I'm the Assistant Director of Climate and Culture for Portland Public Schools, and I lead our district-wide restorative justice work. I'm here to advocate to continue funding Lutheran Community Services Portland Community Justice Partnership at a sustainable level. For the last 6 months, PCJP has partnered with us in order to support restorative justice in our schools, in particular our high schools. As you may already know, PPS is the largest district in the state with over 40,000 students. And as we all are, we're in a time of extreme budget cuts with approximately $70 million over the last 2 years and approximately another $50 million for the next school year. This has resulted in a significant reduction of student support staff district-wide, including our restorative justice staff. A few years ago, we had 31 restorative justice specialists in our schools and 4 district staff. We now only have 7 in our 80-plus schools and 1 district support specialist. As you can imagine, it was quite a relief when PCJP came to us last spring to offer RJ services in our school, given that at the time we were cutting 2 of 3 of our district RJ specialists. This partnership has allowed us to continue to offer RJ in our high schools. It's taken time for us to work our way through all of the MOU contract logistics, background checks for their staff, to fine-tune the referral process and publish district communication, letting our leaders know we have this service. We're now at an exciting time in our partnership because we are finalizing those systems and now ready to work with our high schools, our special ed department, and our expulsion diversion program. Full funding for PCJP would allow our high school students and schools the opportunity to be held accountable for their actions, as well as to repair harm, rebuild trust, and ensure all voices are heard. Losing the funding would undermine the momentum we've built over the last 6 months. It'd be a significant loss to now revoke those services. Ultimately, it'd be unfortunate for our students, both to those who have caused harm and to those who have been harmed, and to eliminate the transformation that is possible through this process. And last here, in addition to fostering a restorative and healing climate after harm at PPS, this collaboration is a crime prevention opportunity. We're directing the cases to PCJP that involve violence, threat of harm, racialized incidents, and intimidation and bullying. Now, having access to PCJP's skilled and diverse staff to provide this intervention now before students enter the criminal justice system is powerful. I ask that you continue sustainable funding for PCJP so that we can continue to grow this resource and provide the much needed restorative justice support in our schools. Thank you for the consideration.
Thank you.
Next up on the schedule, we have Mindy Johnston from Lutheran Community Services Northwest.
Hello, and thank you, Chair and Commissioners, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Mindy Johnston, and I am the Director of Restorative Justice and Victim Services at LCSNW. I am here to address the Grant Advisory Committee's recommendation to significantly reduce our restorative justice grant. This funding supports our work in partnership with the Portland Police Bureau, Portland Public Schools, and other community partners, and it directly advances the goals of this grant: safer communities, accountability, and equitable response to harm. Our program operates in partnership with the Portland Police Bureau, the largest law enforcement agency in Oregon, serving the state's largest city and highest volume of crime. Since submitting our application, we have also made significant progress with Portland Public Schools, the state's largest school district. As a result, schools that have lost RJ positions can now contact our team directly rather than calling police to engage in a restorative justice process when harm occurs. This is a major development. It allows schools to interrupt the school to prison pipeline, reduce exclusionary discipline, and keep youth connected to their school communities while still addressing accountability and repair. It reflects years of trust building and systems alignment and shows restorative justice functioning as a true alternative to punitive responses. Together with our partners, we are implementing a community-based alternative to the criminal and juvenile legal systems that centers the needs of the harm party, fosters accountability, and avoids criminalization whenever possible. These are not aspirational goals. They are the daily practice of our work. From the outset, we understood that changing systems shaped by centuries of punitive approaches would take time. Culture change within criminal, legal, and educational systems takes years, often decades, especially when addressing historical inequities and disproportionate harm to marginalized communities. We committed to this work because we have seen restorative justice succeed and because we know the harm caused when systems re-traumatize victims and push people deeper into the legal system instead of towards repair. Since the application was submitted, we are seeing tangible results. Referrals are increasing, partnerships are deepening, and in the coming days, the Portland Police Bureau is launching a restorative justice specific icon on its internal dashboard. This is a systems level change that makes restorative justice visible to officers at the point of decision making. This is what real systems change looks like. While our work operates outside the criminal legal system, it is deeply connected to it. We are embedded in the community, working directly with people impacted by harm, survivors, families, and those responsible, focused on accountability, repair, and healing. Building community capacity for this work needs to grow, not shrink, if we want fewer people entering the legal system in the first place. After 3 years of sustained investment, that momentum is real, yet the proposed reduction would eliminate approximately 80% of our small team. This would not slow the work, it would dismantle it, costing us skilled staff, institutional knowledge, and hard-won trust with partners. So I must ask, why is Oregon's largest city facing the greatest need and most complex challenges being allocated a fraction of the support it previously received? Why scale back investment just as this work begins to take root? If we are serious about long-term public safety, accountability, and equity, we must also be serious about the time and capacity required to achieve them. Restorative justice works, but only if we allow it the stability and scale necessary to mature. I urge the Commission to reconsider the recommended reductions, and I thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
And
Anybody
last
else?
up, yeah, one more person on the schedule today, Brody Sargent from Portland Police Bureau.
Hello, I'm Brody Sargent. I am the interim equity manager at the Portland Police Bureau. I have been involved with PCJP for a number of years that they've worked with us. And I can say that they are extremely responsive partners, extremely creative partners, and extremely valuable partners. What they have sought out to do is extremely hard and has never been sought at an agency of PPB's scale before. The largest we've seen is Longmont, Colorado, which is smaller. And they've done a very good job about laying a foundation. Several times a year, our new Advanced Academy goes through a training in which we allocate a significant amount of time to restorative justice training so that younger officers are more familiar with it. Additionally, as Mindy brought up, we are investing in an icon or application that more quickly allows officers to refer people to the restorative justice process, and part of that is due to the diligent work that PCJP does in constantly working with police and figuring out where any barriers are and addressing them. A long-standing source of change skepticism within policing is not necessarily always a skepticism of alternatives to the traditional justice system, but a skepticism of the continued support of those alternatives over time. Most officers that are veteran have seen a variety of community programs come and go and tend to be hesitant to invest in learning how to do a no program only to refer community members to a non-existent program a few years in. So when programs stay, when they are allowed to build and become more normalized within the organization, they don't just help themselves, they help additional things such as deflection programs and other eventual changes to the criminal justice system by reducing organizational cynicism that we as the equity office often have to face when trying to get officers or work with officers to connect people to services. PCJP has been extremely present. They've been extremely helpful. They've been a learning organization. They have not, if they find something not working, they change course. They don't double down. But they have been completely devoted to restorative justice, and we are seeing that. And I have really confidence that a lot of the seeds we're planting will, with continued cessation, bloom into something quite a bit bigger than what we've seen so far, which has already been wonderful in terms of some of the outcomes that we've had from working with PCJP. So I'd really just like to fully state they have support. I talked about the program with the chief recently. Where PPB is in, we are continually going to find a way to make this work and make this transformational, but it isn't a kind of thing that can happen overnight. It requires system building. It requires figuring out the kinks, and that's what we've done with the work on the icon by bringing it into Advanced Academy, and we really want to normalize it. But in order for it to be normalized, there needs to be a sense of stability, and people can't say, well, I could learn that system, but it will just go away in a few years like they always do. And so I would really argue for not just PCJP, but for change work in general, that the funding be considered stable in order to build that sense that RJ is not going away, that this isn't a fad coming out of 2020, that this is the way in which Oregon seeks to modify the justice system for more equitable outcomes into the foreseeable future. That's my time.
Thank you. All right, well, this is timely as our next item on the agenda is the Restorative Justice Grant Program. And I believe Rima is going to lead us through that conversation.
Yes, good afternoon. First, I would just like to check and see if you can hear me. I'm still having audio problems. I see nodding, so excellent. Yep. So just give me a second and I will load up my presentation. All right, can everyone see the presentation?
Yep.
So I will get started then. So Good afternoon, Chair Solomon and commissioners. For the record, my name is Rima Atung. I'm the grant coordinator for the Restorative Justice Grant. Today, I'm going to be talking to you about the grant award decisions for the 2025-2027 biennium for this program. Our objective today is to review the Restorative Justice Grant Advisory Committee's most recent application reanalysis process that was completed following the Commission's instructions from a previous Commission meeting and the funding awards they have approved using this new process. In accordance with OAR 213-40-70, you may then choose to authorize those GAC awards in whole or in part, return them for further review, which you did previously, or decline to authorize them in whole or in part based on some ineligibility that you specify. So for the RJ grant, there is $4 million in funding available for the 2025-27 biennium. For that funding, CJC received 13 applications requesting a total of $8,536,492, so more than twice the amount of funds we have available. Of those 13 applicants, 7 are for established programs and 6 are for applicants looking to implement new restorative justice programs. Of those implementation programs, 5 were actually awarded RJ grants during the last biennium to conduct planning for new RJ programs. So in that sense, they're returning grantees, even if they may not have established programs at this time. I do also want to make note about one of our established program applicants. Independent of the Grant Advisory Committee's process, the application from Conflict Artistry has been placed on hold pending an administrative review related to their prior grant award. This application and the associated funding recommendation will not be included in today's presentation or decision. We anticipate the matter will be taken up at the Commission's next meeting on February 3rd. So just a note moving forward, if some of the funds don't sum up to $4 million and whatnot, that's the reason why. So the Restorative Justice Grant Program includes several requirements that applicants must meet. First, the applicant program must serve the definition of restorative justice established in the rules and statute, which states the program must be a community-based alternative to the criminal and juvenile legal systems that aims to center the needs of the harmed party and foster accountability within the responsible party without resorting to incarceration or criminal conviction. The program must also be front-end or operate pre-conviction or pre-adjudication in any of the areas shown on the left side of this graphic in the gray portion there. Additionally, there are 6 grant eligibility requirements that applicants must meet to receive funds and 7 preferences that can be considered during the award process. So I'll pause here for just a second so you can read through those just to refresh your memory. I know we've seen this in previous meetings at this point. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and move forward. If you have questions about any of these requirements or preferences, we can always come back to this. On September 16th, 2025, the Commission reviewed the RJ applications and the GAC award recommendations that were made at that time and chose to return all applications to the GAC for further review. Your instructions, paraphrased, are presented here. So they were for the GAC to start fresh and analyze all applications submitted under the solicitation again, to conduct a consistent and equitable review process that aligns with the program rules, preferences, and criteria set by the solicitation, and also incorporates GAC feedback in a systematic and meaningful way, and then also to review the following additional criteria. So number of clients referred, number of clients served, percentage of clients that completed the program, average cost per client, average number of hours per client, and average cost per client hour. All of this was based on data submitted by the applicant in their application. And finally, the instructions were to apply some kind of weight to that additional criteria in the calculation of the final score in an effort to tie the award decision-making process to performance where possible. Based on those instructions, the GAC met on October 6th and came up with a plan on how to accomplish this. They opted to start fresh by rescoring each application using a simplified scoring rubric focused only on those requirements and preferences on that slide we saw earlier, and the commission highlighted criteria that I just mentioned. And these rescoring would be done through a survey completed by each GAC member individually for each individual application. The scoring survey also included gathering GAC recommendations for how to apply the scoring to award decisions and what budget reduction strategies to then employ to make those funding decisions. During this meeting on October 6th, the GAC also set the initial deadline for the survey, and then they opted to discuss the survey results and award decisions in a single longer GAC meeting rather than a series of shorter meetings, I think just to expedite the process. Any questions about the scoring survey or anything else up to this point? And there was an example of the survey included in your memo that was provided. All right.
Any questions, commissioners? Go ahead, Rima.
Sure. So out of the 9 GAC members, 7 completed the survey. Due to conflicts of interest, this translates into between 4 and 6 scores for each application. The GAC initial score is just the straight average of those scores for each application. For eligibility questions, so those are the questions about criteria that the applicant must meet to get funding. If half or more of the GAC members said they did not meet that criteria, the applicant was deemed ineligible. And based on that, only one applicant was deemed ineligible to fund, and that was Union County. So the next step was, per the instructions from the commission, the GAC determined an appropriate weight that would be applied to the criteria highlighted by the commission as most important to consider in making those funding determinations. So just as a reminder, that criteria is included in the yellow box on the right part of the slide. So that's those performance related things like clients referred, served, cost per client, etc. There's a lot of information on this slide. So to put it simply, the formula for calculating the final adjusted score basically broke the application score into 2 components. One for all of the sections excluding those commission highlighted criteria. So that's the eligibility, program preferences, and budget. And one for those commission highlighted criteria. The weights the GAC chose are shown on this slide, as well as just an example of how the calculation works. And the weights the GAC voted on to apply in the final formula are 42.5% for the sections excluding those commission highlighted criteria and 57.5% for the commission highlighted criteria. And the reasoning that was shared during that meeting was really to emphasize the importance of that criteria and of program performance in that final score calculation and all the award decisions that resulted from those scores. Any questions or comments on this?
Yeah, go ahead, Amy.
Thank you, Chair. Rima, I wasn't here for the prior conversation, so this may be an uninformed question, but my question is, as you talked about the established programs versus the new programs, and for the implementation programs. For the implementation programs, is that commission score weight portion, is that based on an estimate, given that they're, not established programs?
Yeah, it is. So it's whatever estimate both the the established and implementation programs provided in their application. In previous meetings, we discussed about how there were some discrepancies in the data we were getting even for the established programs, so we had to rely on those estimates.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So here is a table that shows those initial scores and the final adjusted scores for the applicants. And as you can see, there was, some movement based on weighting that performance criteria higher than the rest of the application. So next, we're going to discuss the budget reduction and award strategies that the Grant Advisory Committee used. So first, as our normal process, staff went through and applied our standard budget reductions that we do for all grants. So those reductions include things like calculation adjustments, removal of unallowable line items, removal of out-of-scope items, adjusting the administrative costs. That resulted in a reduction of about $418,000 across all applications, and that reduction was previously approved by the GAC, so we were able to just carry that forward into this discussion. So here's just a breakdown and a reminder. So there's $4 million available. Taking out that $418,000, the GAC still had about $4.1 million over in requested funds than we had available, or than we have available to award. As I mentioned previously, the survey also asked the GAC to share budget reduction strategies, and the responses were categorized by which budget reduction method they described, as well as whether the method was feasible at this point in the solicitation process or not. So for example, we got a couple of great ones that would need to have been communicated at the point of solicitation. So we couldn't employ them. But overall, 5 of the 7 GAC members recommended doing some type of scaled or tiered budget reduction method. So that really rose to the top as the chosen budget reduction method. Of those, 5 recommended doing 3 tiers based on the applicant score and how they ranked in comparison to other applicants. So after discussion, that was adopted by the GAC, and the 3 tiers were defined as shown in this table here. So the highest ranking or highest scoring top applicants were approved for 85% of their adjusted ask. The middle 4 were approved for 67.5% of their adjusted ask, and the ones that scored the bottom scores were approved for 22.22% of their adjusted ask. And just a reminder that adjusted ask is the ask minus those standard CJC budget reductions. So that is what was voted on and approved by the GAC. So this final table here shows the initial ask amount, the adjusted ask, and then that approved amount once those the scores and the tiers were employed.
Rima, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Can you back up to the previous slide? Can you describe the process by which they came up with the funding percentages?
Yes, absolutely. So we really focused on this methodology since that had risen to the top as the method across all of the surveys that we got back. So staff prepared a spreadsheet where we could play with the percentages during the conversation, and the GAC spent, I think it was several hours on really trying to figure out what the appropriate percentages would be based on their goals for the program. If I'm kind of summarizing, but
Mhm.
for example, there was a lot of discussion about how much support should be given to those highest scoring applicants. And they really didn't want to go below 85%. So then we had to adjust the other percentages accordingly. And the GAC had a lot of discussion about, one of their initial decisions was whether or not to provide funding for those lowest ranked applicants. And they decided early on that they wanted to do that. So then if we had to adjust the percentages accordingly as well. So it was a combination of them, making those determinations and then also having to deal with the reality of how much funding was available and what percentages there needed to be so we could do what they were asking of us, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So here are those amounts that the GAC approved again. So from this point, it's really open for discussion from you. And then of course I have some sample motion language if you folks choose to move forward with those approved amounts.
Great. Well, I'll open it up for conversation, but first, I'll just say that these are, genuinely heart-wrenching decisions. We see the impact of these programs on real people and communities, yet we're forced to choose among the strongest proposals because the demand far exceeds the available resources when we've got $8 million of need met up with $4 million of funding. The gap isn't theoretical and is going to show up in people's lives. And it's one of the hardest decisions that we have to make. Having said that, I believe the GAC appropriately weighted and developed a process based on our direction. So open it up for questions, discussion, and we'll go from there.
Mr. Chair, this is Tim Freeman.
Yes, go ahead, Commissioner Freeman.
I want to compliment the staff and the advisory committee, grant advisory committee on the work they did, taking the direction from the commission and kind of reassessing this and putting a methodology together. It's very well thought out.
Indeed. Any other comments, questions? All right, you want to bring back the motion language, Rima? There's no further discussion. Is there someone willing to make a motion to authorize the 2025-27 RJ awards as shown in the GAC approved awards funding table?
This is Freeman. I would approve that or make that motion, to approve.
Great. Is there a second?
This is Lehman. I'll second.
All right, we have a motion made by Commissioner Freeman, seconded by Commissioner Lehman. All those in favor, oh, actually, Jenny, roll call, please.
Absolutely.
It's about to steal your thunder.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner Harris,
Yes.
Commissioner Lehman,
Yes.
Commissioner Perosa,
Yes.
and Chair Solomon.
Yes.
And that passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. And thank you to all of those who showed up and testified today. Appreciate the time that you've taken and the programs that you're working with. They are valuable to our communities. All right, next up is the Oregon Retail Theft Grant Protest, and I believe Shelby is going to walk us through that.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you,
you, Chair
Rima.
Solomon. Just one moment while I bring up my presentation. Okay, so just to confirm, are you able to see that, Chair Solomon?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So yes, good afternoon, Chair Solomon and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Shelby Grauer, and I'm the grant coordinator for the Organized Retail Theft Grant Program. I'm stepping in today for Rachel to present the 25-27 Organized Retail Theft Grant Program protest. A memo was sent to the Commission prior to this meeting, but I am going to continue through with the protest as well as the staff recommendation. So we received one protest from the Springfield Police Department. Their protest claims that they were not awarded points for the budget projection sheet narrative requirement during the final application phase. So moving into the process review, Springfield PD was instructed to submit an updated budget projection sheet as part of their final application. Specifically, they needed to complete the narrative portion, which they had failed to do during the preliminary round of the grant. A corresponding score was recorded in the score sheet reflecting the applicant's responsiveness to the expectations set by the Commission for the final application round. A score of up to 5 points was available during the final scoring for the budget projection sheet component, with Springfield PD receiving 4 of those 5 points available. Springfield PD's scores were then calculated as a percentage of points possible, and they received a final score of 81%. So with this information in mind, the staff recommendation would be to decline the request for corrective action submitted by Springfield PD, as there was no error based on law, rule, or solicitation language found in the application or the reduction strategies used. Chair Solomon, I'm happy to pause for any questions after the staff recommendation.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Shelby.
Absolutely.
All right, folks. At this point, is there any discussion as to whether to open this up, or shall we proceed with staff's recommendation?
Chair, this is Chris Perosa. I just have a couple of questions, if I could ask.
You bet.
So it looks to me like there were, as a part of this final application, there were kind of 2 stages that were evaluated. There's a preliminary stage that where applicants who met all the application requirements in the previously submitted application were not required to respond to feedback. And it sounds like Springfield had adequately responded in their first application. So there were no points for Springfield to gain through that first stage. Is that correct?
That is correct. So there were 2 paths, those that met all of the requirements like Springfield did, and those who did not. So those that met all of the application requirements and were not required to respond to feedback did not have to respond to feedback and therefore did not receive a score within that first line of the final application score sheet.
Which is the difference between, if I'm correct on this, a difference between Clackamas County, the Clackamas County District Attorney's Office and Phoenix Police Department's application. They actually had clarification to make within the final application process in stage 1. Is that right? So they received some points as a result of that.
So I would have to look back at theirs specifically in order to say if that is what applied to them specifically, but those that had a score in that first score sheet or that first line item there of the final score were ones that had information that they needed to provide in order to meet the application requirements.
And with regard to the 5 points in stage 2, do we know what Springfield missed to only get 4 of the potential 5 points?
We do. So applicants were asked to provide a percentage of time that items would be focused on combating organized retail theft specifically, and were asked to match their requested percentage or their requested amount for each amount to be equal to that percentage. So if they were requesting for hypothetically a vehicle that costs $50,000, but said that it only combated organized retail theft 25% of the time, they needed to match that percentage to be 50% or whatever percentage it is that they provided that value. So the 2 needed to match. Springfield PD did not match the items that they were requesting to the percentage that they indicated that they would be specifically combating organized retail theft. So they received a 1-point deduction, which was applied to all applicants throughout the score process equally who did the same error.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
All right, any other discussion? All right, so is there an action we need to take on this, Shelby?
So it would either be the commission would need to state that they're going to take action with it or that they are not. So the commission may either decide to take action based on a finding of error, or they may
Yeah.
decline to take action based on a finding of no error.
Okay, great. Unless there's further discussion at this point, it does not appear that there's a finding of error that would cause us to reopen this.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Solomon and Commissioners.
All right, thank you. Next up is the Oregon Atlas of Collaboration report that talks about the LIPSIC survey. And I believe we're going to hear from Tina Nabachi from Syracuse University.
Correct. Hello, everyone. And thank you so much for inviting me and my doctoral student, Joanne Kim, who's here on the meeting with us, to talk with you about some research that we've done on the LIPSICs. I thought I would start out by telling you a little bit about the history of this project. So in 2018, the National Policy Consensus Center at Portland State University and the Program for the Advancement of Research on Conflict and Collaboration at Syracuse University joined forces to create the Atlas of Collaboration, which is an effort to build a large end database on collaborative governance. And as a first step towards that larger goal, we've really been focusing on the ongoing state-connected collaborative work that's happening all across the state of Oregon. As part of that effort in Oregon, we pilot tested a survey with all the participants in the LIPSICs. So thank you very much for helping to get those participants to complete the survey. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time with you talking about some of the key findings we found, and maybe some recommendations for the CJC and the LIPSICs to think about as they continue forward with their work. Before I do that, though, let me talk a little bit about some of the key concepts we're looking at. Great, thanks, Jenny. So that's right, Jenny. We'll go to the next slide. So in our research on collaborative governance, we talk about some key concepts. Collaborative governance is essentially an effort where organizations are working across boundaries to solve challenges that they can't solve on their own. Collaborative governance regimes are like LIPSICs. They are the organizations that are doing the collaboratives, and collaborative platforms are like the CJC, which is really helping to coordinate and advance the efforts of the individual CGRs, the individual LIPSICs, but also to help improve collective impacts across the states. So we use these concepts of collaborative governance regimes, which are represented by LIPSICs, and the collaborative platform, which is represented by the CJC throughout this report. Next. And so, as I mentioned, we are really trying to build a large end database on collaborative governance. Listen, collaboration is happening all across the country, indeed all around the world, as governments are trying to find more innovative solutions to persistent public policy problems. And Oregon represents a really unique empirical context to study collaboration. So Oregon has become the prototype entry in our atlas. As we started this work in 2018, we were able to identify over 240 externally directed CGRs, that is collaborative governance regimes that were mandated by the state. Those collaborative governance regimes are operating across 13 different collaborative platforms across 5 policy areas: economic development, education, environment or natural resources, health, and public safety. Next slide. Here you can see a little bit more of a breakdown of this broader collaborative system that's happening in Oregon. So you can see our policy areas out there, the various collaborative platforms, and the state-connected CGRs. And again, what we're looking at here is not all instances of collaborative governance that are happening across the state, but specific instances where the state is requiring or incentivizing collaboration. We can go to the next one. So as part of our effort, we've done a tremendous amount of work here, cataloging and categorizing all the various collaboratives that are happening. We've looked for outcome data. We've done a number of analyses to look at laws and the things that are propelling collaboration in the state. One piece of our research was to create a survey that focused on the participants in collaboration. And we based this survey on theoretical work that I did with my colleague, Kirk Emerson, called the Integrative Framework for Collaborative Governance. That's this fun little circular picture here. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail about how all of this works, but basically I'll say that the survey is designed around some of these key concepts in the framework, and I'll talk more about our results as we find them. The survey was administered online. It has a consent form and then 6 modules that capture information about the individual respondent, the collaborative they're working in, the drivers and context in which collaboration is unfolding, the nature of their collaborative governance regimes, how they work together in collaborative dynamics, and then some of the actions, outcomes, and impacts they've seen. The questions are multiple choice questions, scale questions, and a few open-ended questions. All of our responses are anonymous, and we report them only in the aggregate. And we did this so people would feel free to say truly what they were experiencing, so that they would know their individual responses couldn't be traced back to them. And all of the data were stored in an online password-protected program. And so we developed this survey, but we needed someone to pilot test it, and we needed to pilot test it somewhere. And so thanks to support from Ian Davidson and others at the CJC, we were able to work with the LIPSICs to ask them to complete the survey. This allowed us both to pilot test the survey and make sure that our instrument was okay, but also hopefully to provide information that would be useful to the individual LIPSICs and to the CJC. So next slide. So we successfully sent the survey to 690 individuals in each of the 36 LPSCCs across the state. What was interesting to us is that there is no master list of all of the participants in LIPSICs across the state. So we really had to do some digging and rely on individual chairs to help us find that contact information. Of those 690 individuals that we were able to contact, we had 193 usable responses from 34 LIPSICs across the state. That's a response rate of about 28%. I should note that the response rates varied notably across the councils, and that survey completion rates also varied among respondents. To help incentivize participation, we offered to make a donation on behalf of each participant who completed the survey. And so we were able to make over $1,300 in donations to a bunch of statewide nonprofits who work in the public safety arena. We can go to the next one. So what did we find? Well, we found that most participants and most of the LIPSICs, about 65%, reported that their collaborative was stable, that it was mature, that it was functioning well, although 21% said they were still developing and growing, and about 7% said their collaborative was on the decline. We looked at a number of indicators of governance. Most collaboratives, most LIPSICs are meeting quarterly or monthly. They have very low staffing levels. About a third have 0 full-time employees. About 40% have 1 part-time employee, and about 27% have 1 full-time employee. Most of the LIPSICs use majority vote or consensus rules for their decision-making. 82% use a facilitator to help them run their meetings. Of those that do use a facilitator, about 70% are an internal council member, and about 16% are an external hired professional. About 48% of the LIPSICs use subcommittees or working groups to help them process through their information, make decisions, and take actions. We also measured a number of characteristics about the participants. We found that there's a lot of diversity in terms of the length of time people have been participating in LIPSICs, some for just under 2 years, most from 2 to 5 years, some for more than a decade, and that there's a lot of multi-sectoral participation in the LIPSICs, but most members are from the state or local government. We can go to the next slide. We also investigated system context. So collaboration doesn't unfold in a vacuum. It occurs in this much broader context that has a lot of forces that both enable and constrain participation. and enable and constrain collaboration. So using a Likert scale where 1 is a strong negative effect to 5 a strong positive effect, we asked people about various elements in the system context. You can see that what's really interesting here is that nothing stood out as being overwhelmingly positive or overwhelmingly negative. That is, there were no elements of the context that received a 1 or a 4 or a 5. But in general, conflict, partisanship, and political polarization, political leaders and public officials were seen as having a negative effect on collaboration, while socio-demographic and cultural conditions, economic conditions, political turnover, and community leaders were seen as generally having a more positive effect on collaboration. We can go to the next one. We also tried to assess what was driving the use of collaborative governance. Participants reported that they were motivated, that their organization was motivated to participate in the lipsticks because of the interdependent nature of their work. That was the strongest motivator. But also that was followed closely by consequential incentives, such as maximizing funding or resources or being able to influence policy and planning. Participants reported that their organization was less strongly motivated to participate by an initiating leader, somebody who had the kind of gravitas and charm to pull them in and encourage collaboration, and uncertainty, seeing a lot of risk or instability in the policy area. These results, of course, make sense given the nature of public safety work and the age of lipsticks. As you know, lipsticks have been around for, I think, about 30 years. In addition to the drivers of collaboration, we also looked at the processes of collaboration. We can go to the next slide. And here you can think about collaboration dynamics really as the processes of collaboration, how people are working together. Collaboration dynamics has 3 big elements: principled engagement, which is about the behavioral interactions among participants, how they discover, define, deliberate, and make determinations about issues; shared motivation, which is about the interpersonal relationships among participants, their level of trust, understanding, their sense of legitimacy and commitment to the effort; and joint capacity for action. These are the procedural, the functional assets through collaboration, the arrangements, the leadership, the knowledge, and the resources that they bring to the table. As participants move through collaboration dynamics, they develop a shared theory of change. This is an understanding of how their particular actions will address the problem at hand. So this theory of change should really guide actions or the concrete steps taken by collaboratives to fulfill their collective purposes. Next slide. So here, this figure represents the average scores across these different dimensions of the collaborative process: principled engagement, shared motivation, capacity for joint action. You can see that both principled engagement and shared motivation received consistently high ratings, with all of the subdimensions scoring above 4. So this indicates that there were strong interpersonal and behavioral interactions among the participants. In contrast, capacity for joint action received more, I would say, moderate ratings, with all of the subdimensions falling above 3 but below 4. And it's interesting to point out here that resources scored notably lower at 3.21, suggesting that on average, participants perceive resource constraints are hindering the joint efforts of the lipsticks. I just also wanted to point out that theory of change scored the lowest here among all of these indicators, or among the lowest, the second lowest, suggesting that there is possible disagreement or maybe a lack of clarity among participants around the long-term strategic directions for their lipsticks. Interestingly, those who said their lipsticks were at a mature stage of development tended to rate their theory of change higher, about 3.6, than those who saw their lipstick as still developing or declining, which hovered about 2.8 and 2.5, just for comparison. I want to come back to this notion of theory of change in just a minute, but first we can go to the next slide and talk a little bit about collaborative productivity. It's always hard to assess the performance of collaborative governance arrangements, right? Because collaboration occurs over such a long time. It could occur at multiple units of analysis, the actions or outputs that are taken, the outcomes that result, and the impacts or adaptation over the long term. And all of those units of analysis can be assessed at distinct levels, including for the participating organization, for the collaborative governance regime or LIPSIC itself, and for the target goals the collective purpose of those collaboratives. In the survey, we tried to capture perceptions about collaborative productivity, and the next slide, the figure there shows respondents' perceptions about productivity across these levels and units of analysis. So at the participating organization level, participants expressed the highest satisfaction with efficiency, indicating that they believe participation in the LIPSIC is worth effort, time, and resources. But there were lower scores for effectiveness and equilibrium, suggesting that on average, participants are more neutral about whether their organization is improved, is more adaptable, is more stable because of participation in the LIPSIC. At the level of the LIPSICs, efficacy scored relatively high, suggesting that there's agreement that collaborative actions are consistent with collective purpose and goals. But while still positive, perceptions of external legitimacy and viability are a little bit lower, suggesting that there's uncertainty about how others perceive LIPSICs over time. And then finally, at the target goal level, none of the measures scored very well, all fell below a 4 on average. And this suggests that people are only modestly positive about the achievement and durability of their impacts. Equity, interestingly, scored lowest of all the measures, suggesting that people don't believe collective costs and benefits within the LIPSIC are distributed fairly among the member organizations. We can go to the next slide. In addition to some of the scale questions, we asked a number of open-ended questions, and I thought these were pretty insightful, so I wanted to take just a minute to share some insights from those open-ended responses. So first, when asked about what the core purposes of the LIPSIC were, most participants noted that there was a statutory responsibility, that this was a state mandate to achieve public safety goals, but that the purposes really didn't emerge from locally defined problems. They also felt that the purpose of LIPSICs was to help meet needs for coordination, information sharing, and funding oversight. We asked about how the LIPSICs made decisions, how they planned to achieve their goals. And what most participants said was that planning is reactive and issue-based. There's not a lot of strategic planning around clear goals for the LIPSIC. There also were challenges around follow-through and vulnerability to leadership and staffing changes, which could upset what the LIPSICs were doing or trying to do. We asked about the particular kinds of actions the LIPSICs took, and most actions related to getting funding, either getting grant awards or renewals, and information sharing or public education activities. Most actions seem to be taken at the subcommittee level or by partner organizations, not the LIPSIC as a full body in and of itself. And participants noted that there were some constraints on collective action. For example, political conflict, power imbalances, having a lack of authority, limited staffing and capacity really constrained their ability to move forward to achieve some of their goals. We can go to the next one. I promise I'm almost done here. We asked how LIPSICs knew whether they were successful. How are they thinking about impact? How are they thinking about their accomplishments? And what the participants mostly said was that impact is generally assumed through anecdotal evidence, people's professional judgments, observations, storytelling, word of mouth, or impact was inferred when they received a grant award or they were noted for being, in compliance with the statute. They said there was inconsistent availability and use of outcome data, recidivism, participation rates, for example. And we understand that, we think it's probably pretty hard to trace recidivism rates directly back to the work of LIPSICs, but this was something that was noted by many participants. There was some limited use across the LIPSICs of feedback from service users, client testimony, community feedback that assured participants that their LIPSICs were doing good work. Some other issues emerged in those open-ended respondents, including concerns about capacity, the appreciation of having a good facilitator to help guide the work of the lipsticks, frustration around power dynamics, disengaged leaders, and some philosophical divides about whether public safety efforts should be punitive versus rehabilitative or restorative. And there were some mention that those who were participants who were non-voting participants or community-based participants feel unheard. There are a lot more insights in the report that I think everybody has had, but for now I can wrap it up and we can move to the next slide where I'll just offer some observations for the CJC and LIPSICs to consider. So first, the results of the survey suggest that effective governance structures matter. Participation in the LIPSICs reflects a mix of longer-term and newer engagement. Most respondents indicated that they represented a specific organization and had decision-making authority. And most LIPSICs met regularly with facilitators, but variations in staffing, variations in decision-making practices seem to affect how well LIPSICs function. And so the LIPSIC leaders and CJC might want to examine these governance structures a little more closely and offer assistance as necessary. We also know from the survey that external political dynamics can undermine collaborative work, and LIPSICs might need some support in navigating those broader system pressures. A lot of elements were reported to at least somewhat positively affect their work, but participants noted that partisanship, political polarization, conflict, political leaders often had negative effects on their efforts. So this is, again, an area that you might wish to explore and consider ways to help LIPSICs better address those issues, define what those issues are a little more clearly, and figure out how to better address them. The survey results show that there's strong trust within the LIPSICs, but limited resources and uneven governance capacity, again, hinder their ability to take joint action. You know, the nearly 3-decade history of LIPSICs really seems to have fostered a foundation of meaningful dialogue, trust, commitment among participants. And we can see this in a lot of the ratings for collaboration dynamics. But a lot of participants felt that their LIPSIC was insufficiently supported. So maybe we could explore some ways where additional support, financial, technical, staffing, etc., might help LIPSICs accomplish their goals. And we could also explore how variability in staffing and governance structures hinders capacity for action. LIPSICs members understood their broad public purpose, but they lacked long-term strategic direction and clear measures of impact. There's a general understanding of statutory requirements and the broad public safety mandate, but there's limited clarity on theories of change or the strategies that are being used to guide their work. There were also lack of clear measures of success, impacts, and other aspects of performance. And so one thing that CJC might consider is to help LIPSICs articulate and clarify longer-term strategic directions and to develop and implement more consistent and detailed measures of performance. Finally, LIPSICs reported mixed views on collaborative productivity or performance. They found that participation delivers some organizational benefits, but there are concerns about external legitimacy, long-term effectiveness, and fairness in distributing benefits and burdens of participation. Excuse me. And so again, LIPSIC leaders in the CJC might want to further explore those results and identify areas for clarification or improvement in productivity and performance. Overall, we can go to the last slide. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have. Hopefully everybody's had a chance to review those reports that we've sent out, and we're happy to work individually with any of the LIPSICs or with CJC to further explore collaboration. And again, I just want to say thank you to everybody for helping gather participation in the survey and for inviting me here to discuss those results. Thank you. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Talking with the mute button on. Thank you very much. I took great interest in this report. I served on Lane County's LIPSIC for the better part of 2 decades. And I feel like when you see one LIPSIC, you've seen one LIPSIC, because we've got 36 counties and they all operate very differently. There were well, a couple of things. One, I think that this report is timely given the role of the LIPSICs in the 27-29 biennium in creating their public safety plans as part of our grant making process. Historically, one of the primary objectives of LIPSICs is to approve grant and aid funding and justice reinvestment program funding. And oftentimes I've noticed that there are certain players at the table who have a very vested interest and others who don't receive funding that feel outside of the process. And limited resources, I think, is a very real issue. Many of the LIPSICs do not have, as you indicated, paid staff. What stood out to me, though, is that LIPSICs are doing many of the hardest things right. They built trust, they've kept people at the table, but trust alone doesn't produce outcomes. And this report feels like an invitation for us to help move stronger collaboration into clearer strategy, stronger capacity, and ultimately better outcomes. So I've got a number of questions, but I want to open it up for discussion first. Thoughts from other commissioners? Okay, well,
If any questions do come up from
Yeah.
others, I'm the only Tina Nabachi around. If you Google me, you will find me, for better or for worse. And we would be delighted to answer any questions you have and even to work with specific LIPSICs if that would be useful to them. But Paul, I'm happy to answer your questions.
Yeah.
Your summary was very well said.
Thank you. So one of the things is kind of the role of the CJC in relation to the LIPSICs. They're created statutorily through Senate Bill 1145, and I'm a little unclear on, what role we really have outside of maybe an advisory role. And so I guess the question is, where do you see the CJC best positioned to intervene, whether that's, standard setting, technical assistance, funding alignment, facilitation support? Thoughts about that?
Yeah, what's really interesting about the experiments in Oregon is this is one of the very first places where we're seeing a state unit, whether that's an agency or a commission, being asked to, for lack of a better word, shepherd collaborative efforts statewide. And so that's kind of how we have been seeing the role of the CJC as being a platform that helps individual LIPSICs strengthen their work, but also advances broader statewide public safety goals. So a couple of areas where we think CJC could be potentially helpful are just the areas you said, helping to point out the benefits of facilitation, maybe providing facilitation training so that there are more people who are staffed and resourced to help LIPSICs. Thinking about the funding is tough. It's challenging, right? Because there's never enough funding to do what we want to do. But maybe thinking about ways to be innovative with funding or identify other sources of funding could be useful. We think diving into some of these findings and unpacking them a little bit more, which we would be delighted to do with you. We don't want to overstep our bounds, but we're research nerds. We really love this stuff. So we would be happy to dive in more detail to figure that out and to kind of advise CJC on areas to move forward. Joanne, who's my doctoral student and has been doing a lot of work in here. Joanne, do you have anything you would like to add? I think she's still here.
Hi, no, I don't have specific recommendation, but I was my key takeaways was about the limited resources and I guess also limited voice of the non-voting members and community-based organizations. So you may want to consider how they can be more engaged and included in the conversation. I guess that could be your guidance or instructions to the LIPSICs members. And also the funding allocation, you may want to consider the equity measures. I know, like you talked about the grant adjustment earlier, that with the limited budget, you kind of forced to choose the strongest application, but at the same time, those LIPSICs with the limited resources may really have a hard time developing strongest application. So there may be I guess chance to reconsider how you approach I guess evaluate the application in a more equitable way.
Yeah, maybe some technical assistance around grant development. The last thing that I would add, those are great additions. Thank you, Joanne. The last thing that I would add is maybe helping the LIPSICs collectively better understand what their goals ought to be, could be, should be, helping them to plan for achieving those goals and helping to figure out how to actually measure performance so that they can show the impact of their various actions.
Are there specific governance or staffing models that you've seen that appear to correlate with stronger performance that we could encourage or incentivize?
Honestly, I can tell you what my gut tells me from our kind of limited work that we've been doing. So we're just pilot testing some of this data collection with the LIPSICs. We hope to do it with the other 12 platforms in Oregon. And to answer these questions is exactly why we need this large N data, right? So I would say we know in general, it appears that performance is enhanced when there's facilitation that can help the collaboratives decide not just what to do, but how to do it. So there's some facilitation to help with decision making, to build a sense of collective purpose, articulate clear goals, develop a good theory of change. If we take action X, then we expect Y will occur. And that facilitation process can help make those decisions, but also help the group to adapt and change if they find out their strategies are not working. And then one of the big things we heard was around staffing, particularly for LIPSICs in smaller counties, really just having somebody to even do the coordinative work of taking minutes, setting up meetings. That requires, that takes time from people who are already busy and have big portfolios at work. So even if there was a way to provide state level staffing where smaller organizations could, apply for 10 hours of staffing a week, could be useful for a lot of these smaller, more rural LIPSICs.
Great. And I see we have a question from Commissioner Freeman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and maybe not as much a question as just some input.
Yeah.
So I have a unique sort of perspective. In my time in the legislature, I worked on 3 different of the columns of categories of these collaborations. I did healthcare, education, and public safety. So I understand it from the legislative standpoint. And now that I'm a county commissioner, several of these I still get to do some work in implementing. And the one thing we heard consistently when I was in the legislature, and I will confirm that 100% now that I'm trying to help implement, is quit changing everything. Set what you're going to do, explain to people what you want them to do, and have them do it. Every time there's a legislative session, everything changes. So some of those results you saw was, not knowing direction, not knowing buy-in, not having local control. Those things make it frustrating. So people give up. They quit trying to chase, whatever today's goal is, because they know tomorrow's goal is going to be different. So figure out what you want to do and do it, and empower those people that are out there doing the work in your LIPSICs. I'm not part of a LIPSIC, but tell them what you want, give them the tools to do it, and quit changing things.
Thank you. Commissioner Lehman.
Yes, thank you for doing this work. I think it's actually very helpful to think a little bit about how we make decisions. I'm thinking a little bit about the importance of this work when we think about how we are going to implement 3069, and the importance of the LIPSICs during those process of a single application in a county, and hearing about how different each county, and there should be some level of difference. Counties are different from each other and how they operate and what sizes of the county matter, and what's going on in those counties matter, and just demographics and landscape and everything matters, other things. But at a basic level, we need some level of an organizational structure that operates well and is able to make decisions. And I think it's going to be even more important. So I do think there's a space for the CJC to have a process and an ability to help the counties better organize and run their LIPSICs and finding ways to help them facilitate it to whatever way we need. Again, in our own resource challenges that we have to do that. But I think that it's going to be even more important that there's going to be going forward. And I just wanted to put that out there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great points from both commissioners. Thank you.
Any other questions? So I'll share one other question, and then if you're open to it, I've got a bunch of questions that I wrote down, so maybe I can just send them to you in writing.
Absolutely.
That would be helpful. So I noticed that equity scored lowest at the target level goal. How are participants defining equity in this context, and what might help them move from, aspirational to, accountability?
Right. Equity is equity we measured as a question about whether people believed that the collective costs and benefits of participating, working in the LPSCC were distributed fairly among organizations. So it's basically like, is everybody putting in the same amount? Is everybody doing the same amount of work? Are they getting the same amount of benefits? Yeah. And, and it seems, well, that scored low. It didn't score negatively. It scored a little bit neutrally. And that may really be a function of the public safety, kind of just the nature of the public safety community, like who's responsible for executing what particular things. So we'd have to dive in a little bit more deeply to see what actions particularly were taken. But yeah, people do not feel that the costs and benefits are distributed equally. Some are putting in more work, some are reaping more benefits.
Got it. Okay, well, thank you very much. This was very informative and I believe timely, given the mandates in House Bill 3069. So we look forward to continuing the conversation and continuing to think about how we can best support LIPSICs around the state to be more effective.
Great. Well, if there's anything that we can do for the CJC or for any of the individual LIPSICs, please don't hesitate to reach out. And thank you again for letting us share the results with you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, here's an agenda. Next up, we get to hear from Kelly Officer about the Oregon Crime Statistics update.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chair Solomon and Commissioners. For the record, Kelly Officer, Research Director at CJC. Good to see you all today. I'll pull up my presentation here. I have an update for you all on reported crime rate trends in Oregon. This is always the hardest part, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
There we go. We'll do this. Okay. That is not, I want to show this one over here. Let's try again. Here we go.
We got faith in you, Kelly.
I just did this last time. Okay, how about that?
Yes, we can see the cover page.
Thank you. All right, I see what I got going on here. Okay, so you all have seen some version of this. Well, most have seen a version of this in the past, but just as a reminder, what we're looking at here are reported crime data from the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Program, or UCR program. This is data collected from law enforcement agencies across the country that is then sent to the FBI. So they're in bold on the slide. These are crimes known to law enforcement, so either reported to law enforcement agencies or that they're aware of in the course of their work. So crimes not reported to law enforcement are not included. in these measurements. And the FBI defines violent index crimes as murder, rape, robbery, and aggravated assault, to give an idea of violent crime trends. And then property index crimes as burglary, larceny, theft, and motor vehicle theft. So a strength of this data and program is that the crimes are defined in a consistent way across the country. Not worried about state statutes. The idea is that we have a consistent measure across the country of these specific crimes. And then the weakness, primary weakness, is the lag in the data. It does take the FBI and other federal agencies a long time to process the data at a national level and state level, and we'll come back to that point. So to start with, this is violent index crime all the way back to 1960. So over 60 years of data we have for this particular measure. So you can see that solid red line is the nationwide total. Oregon is the dashed blue line. So for the past 60 years, Oregon's violent index crime rate as a rate per thousand population has been below the national average. Substantial declines both in Oregon and nationwide, roughly in the mid-1990s. You can see a recent peak there for Oregon in 2021 and 2022, and we'll come back to that kind of more recent look for those trends. And then for property crime, going all the way back to 1960 again, Oregon's rate is historically above the national rate. Also seeing those substantial declines in the early to mid 1990s. And Oregon has a recent peak there in 2022. And again, we'll come back to that. So a more recent look here, back to violent crime, more recent look here, 2014 to 2024. So this is the same information as the previous chart, but more recent years. So you can see there from 2014 to 2019, Oregon's rate does kind of gradually increase, and over that time period, increased 13%. And then comparing the increase to 2021 and 22 is another 17%. So that increase in 2021 and 2022 is concerning. A lot of attention on that. And you can see the most recent 2 years, 2023 and 2024, does show slight declines from that. So appears we have hit that peak and now declining from that. And I'll have some other more recent data to kind of show what that is looking like as well, but cautiously optimistic with that peak is declining, and that's a similar trend that's been seen in other states as well. And then for property crime, from 2014 to 2019, both for Oregon and the nation, fairly consistent declines in that property crime rate. You can see Oregon peaks in 2022. And again, for the following 2 years, 23 and 24, declines from that, and have actually declined 19% comparing 2022 to 2024. And again, this also follows a trend that we see in other states as well. So looking at what is happening in other states, a lot of numbers here, but these are the Western states data from the FBI. So both violent crime and property crime, comparing 2023 to 2024. And you can really look down those percent change columns, both for violent and property crime. All of these Western states are showing a decline in those crime measures. So if we look at violent crime, specifically our neighbors to the north, Washington declining 9%, California and Idaho declining about 4%. And then larger declines for property crime. Washington shows nearly 15% decline, and California and Idaho in the 10% range there. So really consistent measures of declining crime here for our most recent update. Now you'll notice I've been talking a lot about 2024 crime data, and believe it or not, it is January 2026. So what has happened in 2025? That would be really important and helpful to know. So the historic lag we've seen from federal agencies is a challenge here. The 2024 data was released in August 2025, and so we would be on a similar cadence. So to have that 2025 data, we're looking at August, September 2026 before that's released, which is just not soon enough. Now the FBI is working on monthly updates. I would say that's a work in progress. So there is some measures to be more timely with that, and that is a work in progress. And I want to take a few minutes to show another option in terms of looking at more timely crime data. And it's an online tool called the Real-Time Crime Index. So it's online, it's free to use, it's pretty easy to use. And this provides crime trend estimates. You'll see that estimates is bolded. So it's not going to match exactly what the FBI releases, but it is an estimate created from other publicly available data sources. So the behind the scenes work is to compile different sources of publicly available crime data, government sources from states and counties, that's compiled and cleaned and audited and then compiled to create an estimate. And it allows for this faster release of crime data, more timely information. Again, it's free, it's online, it's easy to use. This is a privately created, it's created by a private company called AH Datalytics with support from Arnold Ventures. So it is a private company creating this tool, but again, using that publicly available data to compile the estimates to provide the information. So I'll show you an example here. So this is just a screenshot right from that website as an example. So this is violent crimes in Oregon's most populous city, Portland, and it is a 12-month rolling sum of those reported violent crimes in Portland. So you just choose the drop down that's of interest and get a line chart here to look at. So you can see it goes to 2018, and then the pop-up there shows this is providing estimates through October 2025. So we have 10 months of estimated crime data in 2025 to get a sense of what those most recent trends are going to be. So for Portland's violent crime, we see post-COVID a pretty steady increase peaking in mid-2022 with about getting close to 5,500 reported violent index crimes. And then from there, a steady decline that has now kind of flattened in mid-24 through 2025. So we see for 2025 what looks to be a continual gradual decline in those reported violent crimes. We also see this is still above pre-COVID levels, however, has declined from that mid-2022 peak here for Portland. So this just gives an easy to use look at what those trends are and has that more up-to-date information. Now, crime trends are going to look different in different cities, different places. So as an example, here is Hillsborough, which looks different, right? Hillsborough does not have that post-COVID peak in violent crime. Also want to note the scale here, right? In Portland, we were in that 5,000 range. Here we're in the 250 to 300 range. You can see we've got a little more dips and increases in this line, but 2022 and 2023 is fairly consistent. We see somewhat of an increase in 2024 that has now tapered off in 25 for Hillsborough. And then finally, we'll go back to Portland. This is Portland's property crime, reported property crime trends. So again, we see that post-COVID increase really peaking in mid-2022 and then declining from there. And through the most recent data through 2025, continued gradual declines with that property crime. And we can see for the most recent data in 2025 that has for now returns to those pre-COVID levels for reported property crimes in Portland. So provides that more up-to-date information in an easy-to-use format. Oh, I lost, sorry. There we go. Okay. And that concludes the presentation. And I'll be happy to take questions from commissioners.
Commissioner Freeman.
Thank you for that presentation. Just a couple quick questions. So first, I hope everybody knows one of the most dramatic ways to reduce crime rate is to have less police officers. That sounds backwards, right? Police officers make the reports that you base your crime rates on. So in areas of the state, and rural areas of the state especially, but other areas of the state where there's less law enforcement as a percentage of the number of population, do you factor that into any of your figures? I know, like, you know, there's areas of the state, some counties that do the priority on the violent crime, so they focus on getting that work done, but they don't do much work on property crimes. So when you see property crimes declining, as you know, the rate of property crimes declining, that doesn't necessarily mean property crimes are declining. So I'm just curious if you try to factor that into your analysis.
Yeah. Commissioner Freeman, yes, that's a great question. You know, and really this is, you know, law enforcement agencies have required reporting of their crime data, both to the state and to the FBI. And for individuals that report crimes to them, that should then be compiled accurately and folded into the reporting and forwarded on. So you know, we're kind of looking at what crimes are reported from residents versus what crimes law enforcement is detecting from their work. So there is definitely a capacity challenge here. There are technology challenges that come up with this as well. So to the extent that law enforcement is detecting crimes and law enforcement has strained capacity, we could see an impact there. But like, for example, if my child's bike is stolen off the front porch and I report that to law enforcement, they may not have the resources to respond. They may do nothing but take that report. But if they took that report, then that should be rolled into the reported crime data that we're seeing in these statistics coming through here. So now
you're
some
right.
smaller agencies
But what's happened in counties,
there. Yeah.
what's happened in rural counties is people have quit reporting because they know nothing happens. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware that you know, your data, which is good data. I'm not arguing the data. It's a nice presentation, but it assumes the percentage of law enforcement resources per population remains the same over time. And we all know that hasn't happened. So I just want to make sure everybody's aware there's some variance because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's clear that there are limitations with the UCR data, and that's one of them. I'm curious though, Kelly, about why we have consistently been above the nationwide average in property crimes and below the nationwide average in violent crimes. And that feels like it's been pretty consistent historically for decades.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any thoughts about that?
Oh, Chair Solomon, that's an excellent question. You know, I think we can look at that and see some good news, and that the declines of the 90s have, for the most part, sustained outside of those, you know, kind of post-COVID blips there. And that's happened in Oregon and across the country. So we do have that component within that. The violent versus property crime piece, you know, I can hypothesize, I can give you some guesses, but I don't know that I have, you know, solid criminology research to back that up. You know, violent crime is driven by within the data, really highly driven by crime in very urban, dense cities, right? And so in Oregon, we think of Portland, right, Tri-County area, and then from there, not quite as much. So there's a dynamic with that piece of just a different kind of demographic and setup there. There's also just different demographic factors too, right? Young men tend to be kind of driving that component. Oregon tends to have a little older population compared to the nationwide, so there's just some demographic pieces to that. Mm-hmm. There is also a lot of system components to that as well, right? So different crime prevention activities, different resources from different parts of the criminal justice system, I think can all play a part in that. I will just kind of throw out, you know, maybe other commissioners have other thoughts. When we think about like what causes crime to increase and decrease, it's very complicated. You know, we want to have very simple explanations, and that it usually ends up being a pretty tangled web in that regard.
Other questions, thoughts from commissioners? How are you using these data internally?
Yeah, Chair, that's a good question. I think it depends on the research question that has come up. And when we see those spikes, that's when we're really digging into what's going on there, right? And so I think for right now, I think we could say, okay, cautiously optimistic that we're not seeing some of these spikes coming up, thinking about things that need to be addressed there, but also pulling it apart, right? And so thinking about what's happening in Portland and cities versus rural areas, and then that property crime decrease within that, right? You could splitting that out by motor vehicle theft and burglary. Is quite helpful. Those are even though we lump those all into property crimes, those are very different crimes, right? And so we want to kind of pull those apart to see the dynamics and challenges there. The declines in motor vehicle theft are substantial, and so that's a piece really digging into in more detail. I know law enforcement has put a lot of work into kind of some evidence-based work around those pieces. So there are some positive things in there, but I think when we look at crime trends, it's always kind of like, oh man, how can we continue to improve this component?
Great. Looks like we got a couple questions. First for comments from Commissioner Freeman, then Commissioner Lehman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just going to mention that if I remember right, there's some correlation between states that have higher drug use and property crimes. So I think that could be part of the factor too.
Indeed. Commissioner Lehman?
Yeah, to add on to one of the correlates, property crime is highly correlated with houselessness, homelessness, and especially at low-level property crimes. And so, given that Oregon is one of the highest populations of houseless in the country, that can contribute to it as well. So, and another thing that I mentioned, I use the Uniform Crime Report in my work, and knowing the limitations that it has. But one of the things that it can do, and Chair Solomon pointed to this, is that it can be a good tool to look at change over time, because the measures are stable over time. So you can see trends. They may not be a perfect measure at any given one point in time, but the changes are usually fairly accurate representations, like, as a percent change over time or in there. I also, one of the things I hope we can do is not get wrapped up in the public conversation that often tries to look at very short-term changes, year-over changes. This is what it was last year, and this is what it is this year. There's a lot of factors that can go into a one-year change, right? And so the trends that are much over a longer period of time are much more important than a one-year change. What's happened over 3 years, what's happened over 5 years is much more important than what's happened last year to this year. So.
Yeah, great comments. Other thoughts or questions? All right. And Kelly, will we get another report on this in August when the 25 UCR data comes out? Is that the cadence?
Yeah, if you all would like that on your agenda, definitely. I do think that the real-time crime index does provide, an opportunity to kind of see those trends, in a more timely fashion, that can be helpful there, as well. And we'll continue to keep an eye on how the FBI is releasing the data. There's been some changes in that, and so we may have some more timely information there as well, potentially.
Great. Well, we always appreciate the opportunity to look at and dig into the data with you.
Thank you.
All right. I think we're moving on, unless you had anything else you wanted to report.
That is it for today. Thank you.
All right. Interim Director Keck, I think you're going to give us agency updates and bring us home.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon, everybody. Pretty brief today, not too many updates. Bringing to your attention, of course, legislative days are next week. We will likely be asked to provide one or two presentations. No agendas have yet been set, but I do believe the questions are around deflection updates about it. that programming. So you may see us on OLIS for that reason. We do also, I want to point out to y'all, and we'll probably have a presentation, another one from Kelly or her research team for you as we are getting ready to complete our analysis by posed by legislation for not just deflection, but the larger recriminalization of possession of controlled substances and looking at disparities within arrests, crime, charges, et cetera. So we're doing that work right now. It's designed to not be a, say, formal report like we've done in the past, but this is something that'll be published online. We're looking at different ways of kind of some creative ways to provide that, but we'll give you an update on that once completed. And then just a note to say, I'm still exploring how and when to bring together you all in an in-person format. I think we're targeting the March meeting at this point in time. So if you want to keep that in mind, thinking of somewhere centralized, whether that be maybe Salem or Eugene, that maybe is roughly in the middle for everybody, and probably focusing on a review of this grant making period, as well as looking ahead, of course, to 3069, and also want to revisit or arrange the training I had mentioned last time related to public meeting laws and the Government Ethics Commission. So it's just kind of teed up for March. As soon as we have details about that, we'll let you know, so you know the hours, the location, and everything else for that event. That is all I have today.
Great. Well, thank you. It looks like we've got about 20 minutes of our day back. So thank you all for joining today's meeting, and we are officially adjourned.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.